Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be ranking all the legendary items in League of Legends. So if you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. To begin with, I'm going to start with the really bad legendary items in my opinion. Chemtech Putrefier obviously has been changed a couple of times. In its current iteration, it is really bad. You can't apply it like you used to. It's got 8% healing and shield power and lost a lot of its core stat line in trade for it. So this item I'd consider one of the worst in the game at the moment. Do not build it. Warmogs is also on the same tier. Warmogs has been strong in the past, but with introductions of certain items within the current meta, combined with a lot of anti-health stacking items, Warmogs is in a pretty bad spot at the moment. Turbo Chem Tank, not a bad stat line, 500 health, a bit of magic resist. Still just not a great item. The overall active of it is pretty weak, so I'd recommend staying away from it for the moment. Thimble Winter has been stronger in certain circumstances, but as of the moment, it's not performing particularly well. There are maybe one or two champs which build this as their core items, one of them being Tarak, of course, and maybe a couple of others can kind of go towards this build path, but for the most part, you're going to be avoiding this item. It's not very good. It has a pretty mediocre stat line for a tier item. Horizon Focus is going to be my first item in the C tier. It's not got a terrible stat line, but for the most part, there are better items than Horizon Focus, which can do jobs relatively similar in terms of damage and just amplifying damage. Banshees, I'm also going to put down here. It's the only magic resist AP item in the game. It's not bad per se, but for it filling that role of the AP magic resist option, it's pretty bad. Some games you just don't really want the spell shield, and in turn you have an active which is kind of just passive, which just isn't very good. Void Staff is also here. Void Staff has a terrible stat line, but you are very much forced into building this as your kind of anti-tank option as mages. Almost every mage usually requires to pick this item up towards later on in their path, and it's got a pretty bad stat line. It's not an item you want to build, but you're kind of forced into building it. Mercurial Scimitar, you don't usually complete the QSS item, but when you do, this is one of the options. Silver Dawn hasn't got as bad of a stat line, but it's still not as good as other options, so it's also down here in the C tier. Hullbreaker is going to be my last item in the C tier. No, it's struggling. It can be built on certain champions, but a lot of champions will usually avoid it, and even someone like Yorick, who is currently building more Ravenous lethality focus, isn't building it as much, so kind of tells the state of the item. I would avoid building it for the moment. Manamune is going to be my first B tier item. It's not bad. It's just not as strong as the A tier items. It has been stronger in the past. There has been different iterations of it, but in its current state, it works quite nicely on some junglers. Things like Kayn and Hecarim come to mind. It works on some ADCs, Azul, for example. But it's not built on a huge amount of champions, and there are definitely better options. Jace is another user of it, but yeah, better options. Death Stance isn't in as strong of a spot as it used to be. The heal has been massively cut on this item. It went from, I'm pretty sure, something like 175% all the way down to like 85%, I think it is at the moment. So big nerfs towards the item. Overall has put it in a very average spot, so it's going to stay in my B tier. Wit's End has been stronger in the past, but at the moment, B tier is kind of where it lies. It works quite nicely on certain champions. Things like Kayle can use it quite nicely. Kog'Maw, Vayne, or other champions which can use it as an option. It works quite nicely alongside something like a Ginsu's. It's definitely like high up on the B tier. Like a lot of the B tier options aren't bad options and work on certain champions, but a lot of the A tier work in more circumstances and usually see them more often. Or they're like sleeper OP items. Spirit is also going to be in the B tier. Overall the item's just not performing as well as it used to. There are like better, Fon being available is kind of like the strongest magic resist option, and honestly Abyssal, which you'll see in a bit, is also a really strong option after its recent round of buffs, so keep that in mind. Runans is also going to be in the B tier. It's one of the weaker Zeal items. Phantom and the ones aren't coming to mind at the moment, but Phantom being another Zeal option. Oh yeah, RC, which I've also put in the beta. These two are just not as good as Phantom, which is why they're here. Of course, Phantom is going to be in the A tier. It's kind of where I'm going to leave that item. Morellonomicon is a beta option. It's not as bad as it used to be. I think Alternator is quite nice within its build path, but it still has weaknesses. It's not as raw offensive as a lot of major options, and overall the passive isn't as strong as a lot of options as well, so it's going to be in the B tier. Randuin's Omen can be close to the A tier, but as it's very tied towards its anti-crit kind of like how you want to build it, it's just not as strong as Frozen Heart, which I'm going to put in the A tier. It's just the weaker of the two Warden's Mail options. Next is going to be Axiom. Axiom's actually not a bad item. It has been buffed fairly recently from 12 to 18 lethality, and in turn it's not doing as poorly. Works on a couple of champions. It can be abused quite nicely in solo queue by a lot of these options as well. Things like Nocturne, Kiana, even Zed can use it. Chemtech Chainsword used to be a rush option on a lot of champions. After the gold increase on it, isn't so much. Still not a bad item. Gonna be in the B tier. Serpent's Fang works quite nicely on a lot of champions which can build it as an anti-shield option, but because it's more niche, gonna be in the B tier. Knight's Vow, it's close. It's high end B tier, close to A tier. It has its places where it can perform quite nicely, but a lot of the tank items in general just outperform the support tank option, like along with Zeke's, but yeah, which I'm also going to put in the B tier. So yeah, I as much as these items are relatively good, they're very average, which is why we're in the average tier of B. Deadman is also going to be in the B tier. This has been stronger in the past. As of the moment, it's not bad on a lot of champions. If you want Chase, it's a good option. Works quite nicely on things like Darius. Garen can also abuse it quite nicely. So it's going to be in the B tier. Very average. Gargoyles works on a couple of champions. Cassante, high shield targets, things which stack a lot of health. Things like Cho'Gath and Tarb Kench are really good uses of the item. Dr. Mundo also uses it quite nicely. So overall, just an average item as well. Edge of Night works in certain circumstances as a good spell shield option into comps which have very core CC abilities. Things like Ashe R, and you can stay out of range of her W, or you can react towards her W, but then the ult is what catches you out. Edge can work quite nicely there. Stormrazor has been buffed a couple of times. I think it might have been buffed twice now as like a cost reduction and then a bit of an AD increase towards the earlier part of this season. It's still very average. Works quite nicely on Akshan. Past Akshan, you're not really building it, but I think there are places where this item can be built. It's kind of sleeper, but then kind of average at the same time. Guardian Angel is also going to be in the B tier. It's not a bad option. If you're snowballing, it works as a good third, fourth option, even as a fifth option as well. But also pretty average. Not a great stat line. Very much using it for the passive GA. Collector, also a B tier item. Not built as much after the IE changes, the IE Navori changes, where it's that 40% crit, so you tend to go Mythic straight into one of those, and then Collector is built a lot less because of it. So it used to be a good second option on a lot of champions. You can build it as a first option on things like Draven, Caitlyn, Jhin, can all use it as a first option, but for the most part, you're going to be going you're going to be going your Mythic, and then IE or Navori, and then you'll be going Collector if you do build it. Lichbane is going to be in the B tier. It's not a bad item. The changes towards it fairly recently have helped it, but it's not really caught on a lot, and I'm kind of going to leave it in the B tier for the moment. I think Cosmic kind of outperforms it in where it can be used, and if the Sheen passive did a bit more damage, then I could see some spellcasters which auto a bit use it a bit more, but for the moment, it's going to be in the B tier. Yeah, Zeke's has already been placed. Umbral Glaive, I'm also going to put in the B tier. This item has a lot of hype around it. It's pretty nice for clearing wards, but the stat line's fairly mediocre, and there are other lethality options which I just feel like outperform it, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. LDR and the Grievous Wounds option, which has left my mind for the moment, Mortal Reminder, are going to be in the B tier as well. Overall, these items are kind of necessary, similar to Void stuff, but they haven't got great stat lines. LDR, I'd say, outperforms the Grievous Wounds option of Mortal Reminder, because I'd value the Giant Slayer passive on this over Grievous Wounds, but they're both very B tier average items. You do have to eventually pick them up, but there are better items which you want early on into the game. So moving on to the A tier, there's a lot of options here. I'm going to put all the support items here as they are all relatively even in power after a couple of adjustments towards the ranged ones and the melee ones. The melee ones, of course, gaining more health regen. The ranged ones losing a bit of cooldown on the stack scattering. I believe that is all of them. Yep. And then I'm going to put full mail here. Full mail is a very strong item on a lot of champions. It works quite nicely. The Bramble passive is really strong on things like Rammus, Malphite, the heavy armor stackers. So really good item there. Titanic is also a very strong item, deserving of its A tier spot. Works quite nicely on champs with a lot of health and have AD ratios. Things like Mundo can use it really nicely. Shrouders is also going to go in the A tier. Shrouders works as a really valuable tool towards slowing enemies. Same goes for Rylai's. Rylai's is actually an item I considered putting in the S tier. It has a lot of strong users at the moment. People like Swain, Cassiopeia, Aesol all use it really well. Vigilant Wardstone, actually kind of sleeper at the moment. It's definitely being built a lot more. Works quite nicely on certain champions like Fresh and a lot of supports as later options. It's very good on Senna. Do keep that in mind. If you're building Senna, build her Eclipse, Cleaver, RFC into Vigilant Wardstone. That is her best build path. Make sure you're going it. Stark's Gauge is a really strong item on high base AD champions. IE and Navori, both really strong crit options. If you're more of a spellcaster and you want to get spells out more, Navori is your option. If you auto a lot more, go IE. Both are really good. Definitely consider both these options. Zonya's really strong. Of course, Stasis being a really powerful active is really valuable. Nash's Tooth is an A tier item. It is definitely a lot better after the buffs where it gained some more CDR. Things like Kale and Gwen and Varus all come to mind when I think about this item. Echo, also a really good abuser of it. All these champs do really, really well with it, so do build it on them. I can't speak anymore. Essence Reaver, really valuable item on people like GP. Works quite nicely on Ezreal at the moment. Overall, just a good stat line. Has a high price of 3,000 though, I believe now. It used to be a lot cheaper, but it has good AD. Machine passive obviously being really valuable, and crit works quite nicely on a couple of champs which do build it. Ginsu's is really good for on-hit champions. Similar tier to like Navori, IE. I'd say all three of these items are relatively similar in power at the moment. Where are we going? Bloodthirster. Would have been an S tier option, but it got nerfed more recently, and it's quite nicely in the A tier now. A good option if you want some lifesteal and value the shield. So yep. Also really high AD of 55, so quite powerful. More also quite nice. It would probably be close to the S tier if it wasn't lifesteal, because the Omnivamp was a lot more valuable to a lot of the champs which did use it. Lifesteal obviously being more tailored towards ADCs and champs which auto more because, well, it's lifesteal, but it's kind of how it works. Omnivamp helped champs like Aatrox, who aren't doing too well at the moment. Archangels would have also been close to the S tier, but has been nerfed more recently. Youmuu's really, really powerful option if you are snowballing. Works quite nicely on almost all the AD assassins. Also on Jace, works quite nicely. Mikhail's also really good support. Mikhail's is a really good support option. The value of cleansing CC off a champion is really powerful. So Redemption is also another really powerful support option. Both of the other enablers, Sulphur Flowing Water and Ardent, are also really valuable. So we will go in the A tier. Shadow Flame, close to the S tier. Shadow Flame is a really valuable item for a lot of mages. The pen combined with the health and the AP are all really strong. Cosmic Drive is also really good. I reckon it'll probably be A tier. I mean, it's A tier before the changes, and I reckon it will be A close to S tier after the changes. The movement speed, the CDR, the value of the AP, all really good on this item. Rabadon's is close to the S tier as well. Rabadon's, of course, is more of a third, fourth item. If it was able to be built earlier, if it gave more like AP or increased the amount of AP by a large amount, then yeah, it would be an S tier, but it sits quite nicely in the A tier. This item's hardly changed. Fawn is a really valuable tank item. It is one of the better magic resist options, along with Abyssal, which is kind of sleeper now. definitely consider building this if you're playing something like Maokai. Maokai's not being really strong at the moment. Abyssal into Sunfires, into Even Shroud seems to be the best way to go about building him. Anathema's really good anti-carry option if you need to be able to deny a lot of damage from enemy carry, or they have single target damage, and you can build like magic resist and just put this on their ADC kind of thing. Bork, close to the S tier, but has been nerfed more recently, so it's going to sit in the A tier. Works quite nicely as a second option on a lot of champions. And then the legendary, the S tier items. So Sunfire's really powerful, competes with most mythics. It is the best tank item in the game. Sojourn is a really, really powerful bruiser option, works on almost every single bruiser as a really, really good third and fourth option. Ravenous is a really good rush option for a lot of bruisers at the moment. If they're going things like Eclipse or Prowler's Claw, works quite nicely on them. Demonics is the best AP bruiser option. It is almost the only AP bruiser option, Vile of course being the other one. I wouldn't really consider a lot of these other options, like almost any of the other options as AP bruisers. I guess Abyssal is the closest to an AP bruiser option. The Magic Resist Shred kind of gives it that option. But yeah, for the most part, Demonics, Vile both really strong at the moment. Cleaver, really, really valuable as a rush option or a second option on most bruisers. If you need to be anti-armor or they have a lot of armor stacking, then Cleaver works quite nicely. And Medjai's is a really, really powerful AP snowball option. Both these, the AD one and the AP one, are really good at the moment. So if you're snowballing, convert your Dark Stone into Medjai's because it is really powerful in solo queue. So that is my legendary tier list for for the legendary items. If you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.